Добрий день.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for coming. And we are very thankful to our experts who are invited to answer a very simple question, how to implement Paris climate agreements signed by a large amount of countries, including the USA, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine as well. And it will become binding for Ukraine in several days, and Ukraine will be bound by obligations to the global community, and Ukraine can contribute to improvement of environment because we are among the top on the deaths from atmospheric contamination, attributable to atmospheric contamination. Our expert today is Mr. Andriy Zheleznyi, Junior Expert on Climate Change, National Ecological Center of Ukraine, Mr. Gaidutskyi, and Mykhailo Chyzhenko from Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Please be brief. We are waiting for Oleksiy, Ryabchyn, an MP, head of the Subcommittee on Energy Saving and Energy Efficiency, Parliamentary Committee on Fuel and Energy Complex. Good afternoon. Thank you for invitation here to this discussion. The climate change issue for which the Paris Agreement was signed and ratified by lots of countries. This agreement was signed because the temperature, global temperature, is growing. According to NASA, the average temperature on the Earth in February 2016 was 1.35 degrees Celsius higher than during the period 1951 to 1980. People feel this. Maybe someone want temperatures being 10 degrees higher, but if the change take place, they are now ongoing in uneven manner. We can see now the monitoring data in Ukraine in 2016. The February was 6 degrees warmer than average norm. In July, the temperature amplitude was unique from 35 degrees on July 17 to 18 degrees on 21st of July. The temperature on September 12th was 18 degrees, that is 2.9 degrees higher than previous record high. The climate change is due to global change in temperatures, which is caused by the increase in amount of greenhouse gases. The share of greenhouse gases which are formed due to firing of energy resources in the world, they make up 39% of greenhouse gas emissions are generated in the energy sector. In Ukraine, we have the same picture, the same situation. That is why the policy national policies of countries, they should be focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in energy sector, because 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, they are generated in energy sector in Ukraine. The problem is also that we are not energy efficient country. Low energy efficiency and high depreciation rate of equipment in energy sector and in industries in general, the wear and tear of fixed assets in 2014 was almost 84%. We use extremely old equipment to produce goods. That is why talking about our any competitiveness on the world market, we just don't talk about this. Of course, Ukraine, as other countries, have some skeptics, but some people who skeptically accept climate change theories, but Ukraine should improve its economy, in particular energy sector, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This means not only reducing consumption of fossil fuels, this means improvement, modernization of energy sector enterprises and use of green technologies. The reform in Ukraine, which is supported by USAID, in this framework, our institute conducted the research. We cooperated with the Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry and developed the range of targets which should be included into the energy strategy of Ukraine. As we can see on this slide, the first is improving energy efficiency by 2035. The targets have been calculated both with the use of mathematical models and European approach to setting such targets. We propose energy efficiency to be approved on continuous basis, and the share of renewable energy sources also to be growing continuously. Most people in the strategy by 2035 should include long-term goals such as goals by 2050, so that investors and society understand where we are going. Why do we need so long-term plans by 2050? This is for us to move towards low carbon development. We need investment for this. Investments, according to preliminary estimates which are needed, they amount to 75 to 100 billion euros by 2030. They are huge amounts, but we should divide them by years. So we can use this money into support of such infrastructure which contaminate the environment. So we should optimize investment, develop our national production, and maybe we will need less investment if we use energy efficient technologies and develop own national energy efficient technologies. We should do so that Paris Agreement becomes a source of such investments which Ukraine needs. You can see on this slide that 83%, according to our estimates, There are costs to be made for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in energy sector via development of market and use of renewable energy sources and improvement of energy efficiency. Thank you. Now we have many questions, so everything looks very perfect, but where we will take money for this? Andriy Zheleznyi, expert on climate change of National Ecological Center of Ukraine. This presentation was logical in terms of calculations and strategy of energy sector. And how does it look in the opinion of ecologists? I would like to say that we agree that climate change, this is our reality, and now we discuss how to transform our lives to prevent climate change in future in order to prevent disasters. How Ukraine should act to comply with provisions of the Paris Agreement by the end of this century. We should hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius. The positions of countries, they promote growth in global temperature by 2.7 degrees by the end of the century. So the agreement now has already been not complied with by member countries. So in order to prevent global climate change, we should act more ambitiously. All countries should take higher obligations. All countries should reduce greenhouse gas emissions more ambitiously. Otherwise, with every year of delay, catastrophic phenomena will become more abundant. Ukraine also should take more ambitious commitments. This slide demonstrates that Ukraine for 15 years have not been increasing greenhouse gas emissions. We experienced some decoupling. So all myths which were declared in Ukraine that we should increase greenhouse gas emissions. What does it mean, decoupling? It is the term which is used very often. This is the gap between growth in economy and growth in greenhouse gas emissions, when they may not grow thanks to new technologies and new behaviors. To comply with Paris Agreement obligations, Ukraine need not to declare the ambitious the commitments which have been already taken. Ukraine should increase its commitments. So there is economic feasibility to take obligations 64% of the level of 1990s by 2030. This would bring Ukraine to compliance with Paris Agreement. This would be the nationally determined contribution of Ukraine. Paris Agreement also has some mechanisms to strengthen international obligations under Climate Change Convention. Every next contribution of the country should be higher than previous target, and it should be maximum ambitious as concerns potential of the country. Country's potential will be assessed. This is the requirement of Paris Agreement. We environmentalists, we started to think what energy sector should Ukraine have, and we think it should be low carbon development. This is the future of Ukrainian energy sector. In order to comply with energy commitments of Paris Agreement, we should make our nationally determined contribution. These obligations on the world scale, divided per capita, we can see that in Ukraine emissions should be reduced by 80 to 90% by 2050. The entire energy sector should consume 100% less emissions. The share of renewable energy electricity should be produced 100% from renewable energy by 2050. I support the thesis that this can cost 100 billion euros, but energy efficiency is the key to low carbon development. When we would consume less thanks to improved energy efficiency, we will use less generating capacities. So, decreasing energy consumption, we can develop renewable energy sources and comply with Paris Agreement provisions. To achieve the targets, our government can transform energy sector to low carbon development. We should invest at least 1% GDP in Ukraine into EE and RES. This would help us to decrease the mortality rate from air pollution. Now, 54.5 thousand people die because of air pollution in Ukraine. So 100,000 new jobs could be achieved in energy efficiency sector if we invest 1% of GDP in Ukraine every year. And geopolitical threats which we face now, when we comply with Paris Agreement, this would help us in our geopolitical situation not to be dependent on fossil fuels. I would like to ask other speakers to talk more about energy strategy and where the money from use of coal go. So on the one hand, we can see theoretical assumptions, theories, and on the other hand, we see how to develop energy sector in terms of the amount of coal we need, and so on. Now we are giving the floor to Mr. Gaidutskyi.
Good afternoon. I am Ivan Gaidutskyi, and I cooperate with the Fuel and Energy Committee in the framework of work with Berlin Foundation, and my task is to effectively and efficiently reinforce the committee in the framework of CO2 to lowering and to decrease the impact on the environment. So I would like to tell you about the Paris Convention, Paris Agreement. For the world, this is the new idea that united the world. It is for the first time that so many countries got united due to this idea, and so much and efforts were really contributed to this, and this can be a starting point for the development of the economy on a large scale. According to the Paris Agreement, yearly there should be $100 billion allocated for the support of different programs to develop renewable energy and green energy. And as of today, Barclays Capital, they are preparing that their clients should accumulate 20-30 billion up to 2014. So this is the global scale, and when such important investors, they get ready to this, and this trend is moving forward, and 130 investors, biggest investors, signed the letter to the heads of G20 and asked them to ratify the agreement faster, because these 130 companies, they get 13 billion investment package. They prepare it now. So this is not money that should be paid as funds. These are investments that will work for the development. Yes, these are investments. And why is Paris Agreement so important now? Because the ratification of this agreement is the signal for investors. This is the signal for investors that shows that the whole world chose this direction, the plan of the world until 2020. And this is the new starting point for the development of the economy. And that's why all the prospects, they are focused around this point. And what will be the situation in Ukraine, whether we can get some capital. We were lucky that according to Paris Agreement, we do not have binding financial obligations, but we can be a recipient of these funds. We should work on our investment potential. And there are institutional problems in the area. So this problem does not find a lot of attention within the ministries. We do not have even deputy minister on this area. And from 12 ministries, we do not have people responsible for this area. And proper strategies should be based on the fact that energy efficiency is #1 priority. And transfer to renewable energy is one of the top priorities. That's why we should create capabilities for these priorities. And the government, they do not have responsible bodies and people, and we have state energy efficiency and the Ministry of Regional Development, but we should reinforce state support, and we should draw more attention to this topic. And what about the opinion of the deputies you communicate with? Deputies, they understand this problem, and they are active in the area. They start to cooperate, and there are ideas. Not only deputies, but also executive power should get involved, and they should work more on this. And the next factor in the introduction of energy efficiency and transfer to renewable energy, the main actor here is business. Each entrepreneur should have the aim to get profit and to make good, positive contributions to the environment. So they should think not only about profit, but also they should think about environment and the energy efficiency idea. It should be an important aspect. This should be priority number one that will make our economy more powerful. According to the Paris Agreement, we won't have issues with emission, but if we want to grow economically and to raise our GDP and to have this level that satisfies Paris Agreement, it will mean that any investment, they should go to low carbon emission and they should be in the global trend. And we see that companies get united in the framework of Paris Agreement and consortiums that and there are many French banks who are ready to provide loans for the millions of dollars, and this is business. And we see that people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Google, and even Ruslana Lizhichka, they go along this trend and they value these ideas. And we see that protection of the environment is #1 priority in the world, and this is the main message that we support. Mr. Chyzhenko, I would like to hear your comments on this. So, in what way can the state, the government, can pay more attention to these issues, and how to draw the attention of other ministries? Because the main problem now is to resolve the issues with the heating season. And you know, there are many issues connected with Paris Agreement. There are a lot of comments on it. There are many publications. The only thing I wanted to say on this, we should study this document carefully, because there are many speculations concerning the fact that they say that this is a binding document and we should do this or this. But in reality, Paris Agreement is a compromise that was adopted last year. And I would like to say that many issues were discussed during 5 years of preparation of the documents. There are many articles and points where they said not that they should, but it would be desirable that. So there is no binding, there is no obligation, and the billions of dollars mentioned by our colleagues, and this is not stated in this agreement. This is first. Second, you know that, well, being in Paris, American President Barack Obama said that there are two biggest problems in the world: fighting terrorism, and because this is the really dangerous for the world, and also to fight climate change. And we encountered the terror attacks. We know that this is really dangerous, but the problems connected with environment protection are not to this problem. They do not pay enough attention, starting from top officials and each citizen. And you know that at the moment, all the conventions, and we often take part in different meetings, and the issues of environment are on the agenda. And according to the Paris Convention agreement, it is envisaged that the countries will elaborate their strategies of low carbon development that will be calculated up to 2050. And we work on this, and I would like to say that it shouldn't be some separate strategy. Everything is interrelated, and the strategy is closely related with the renewed energy strategy that should be adopted soon. Because it's difficult to say about some goals, for example, 30%, 35%, 60%. No sense if we do not understand what economic model we are going to realize in Ukraine. If we don't understand what economy we build and what Ukraine should be in 15 or 20 years, there should be consensus on this issue. Otherwise, nothing will matter, because we can do things in different ways. Paris Agreement is a trend in the world to transfer to renewable energy, to low carbon footprint. And I would like to cite one important article of Paris Agreement. Article 4. Holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius, the parties should reach global peak of greenhouse gases, and we understand that these emissions will grow, and we do not know whether they will reach its peak up to 2020 or 2030. And the reach of this peak has the longer period for the countries that are developing, and we should reduce the emissions to increase balance between these emissions in the second half of the century based on equality. And so in 50 years, to reach the goal of the Paris Agreement, we should reach the balance. What we emit should be, sometimes they say about decarbonization that we shouldn't emit at all, but maybe we will emit, but this balance should equal zero. So that's what I wanted to say. What are the risks? At the level of management, at the level of government, the risks. Look, institutionally, we are not in a good state that it could be. As an example, in the European Union, there is a separate ministry. It is called General Directorate on Climate Change, and this directorate is like a separate ministry. They have Directorate on Environment, Energy, and Climate is a separate institutional structure, institutional body, and they cooperate with the Energy Directorate and the Environment, Directorate on Environment. And as Dyachuk said, the main is that our emissions are resulted from the energy sphere, extraction, use of fossil fuels, and this is the issue of energy sector, and everything is interrelated in this world. And the issue of biodiversity also relates to climate change. Any question in the area is interrelated with other areas and other problems in different areas. But the main problem that can be resolved, these problems are in the energy sector. Otherwise, we won't reach good results. I would like to ask expert of Razumkov Center to comment on the strategy that has been written for several years. There are several drafts, and the Prime Minister said that they will complete this document, whether it is realistic in order to include it in the energy strategy of the country. You know that energy strategy we have a working group that was created in 2014 in May, and draft document was presented in February 2015, so the strategy was written for half a year, and then, due to different reasons, this process was postponed, and now they restart the process. As to the role of and importance of fighting climate change in the energy strategy, this is one of the main priorities of this document. And if we analyze energy strategy of other countries, we may see that all the goals, forecasts, mechanisms of the implementation of tasks of the strategy, they are based on one thing, that they should fight with climate change, and they build all forecasts on this. And in order to reach these goals that are in the Paris Agreement and in other documents concerning this, so we should change energy balance, we should increase the role of renewable energy, and to decrease the energy consumption, and to reduce the use of fossil fuels, oil, gas, coal. And these issues of creating economy with low emissions of greenhouse gases and energy policy, these issues are interrelated. And while writing this draft document, we invited the representatives of UNO experts from Geneva, and they provided valuable contribution, and we included in our document their recommendations, and we hope that if Ukraine realizes these recommendations, Ukraine will be able to reach important goals in the area. Also, the issue of fighting climate change, this is not the issue of energy policy. This is more global issue. This is an issue of understanding not only how economy develops. This is the issue of civilization. The goal can be reached only after we will shift to other level of understanding, of self-consciousness, to higher levels of responsibility. Then these processes will be realized properly. As to economic policy, in Ukraine, we didn't actually establish the type of economy we are going to build, whether it will be 4.0, 3.0, where we'll be like construction design bureau, or we will be some sort of assembly plant. So we all understand that we cannot return to older models of economic development when we were exploiting metallurgy, chemistry, and maybe machinery, that are those areas that consume a lot of energy. We believe that we cannot return to this type of economy, but the state should identify what it is going to build, what model it implements, and then we will be able to understand what strategy in the sphere of environment we need. So here while creating this overall economic policy, we should take into account global goals of fighting climate change, because no one will need economy if there won't be people, if they die, if they fall ill. So no one will take care of economy if there are no people. So Razumkov Center is one of the oldest think tanks in the country, and you are following these activities for a long time. Do you see some positive trends in the area at the moment? At the moment, we do not feel big steps, so we do not see them, because all politicians are involved in the process of redistributing obligations and financial flows, and there is no coordinated force, a single coordination center that would be able to form a climate change policy as the key element for the development of economy, because this is the main indicator. Without the understanding of this, we won't build economy. This is a fundamental thing, and I now cannot see such comprehensive policy in this. I cannot see unit people who fight the climate change, who would involve all political and economic forces in order to reach this really important goal for humanity, and of course including citizens of Ukraine. Oleksiy Ryabchyn joined us. He's the deputy and the representative of the committee. And how to highlight this issue and to put it on the agenda? And we hear a lot of discussion on coals, but less discussion about emissions, and we know that 40% of electricity are produced by burning coal. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. I'm Ryabchyn Oleksiy, Batькivshchina faction, Fuel and Coal Committee. And what committee concerning climate change? This is interdisciplinary area. It is in energy, in agriculture, transport. It includes many areas, maybe all the areas of the economy. That's why people do not understand the scope, the scale of the challenge that the states face in order to fight this climate change, or to prevent climate change. I do not know what my colleagues was. So I look at their faces and I completely agree with them. So they made proper diagnosis of the problem, and I know that these people are the leaders of the areas they represent. And when they say that nothing changed in policy, I disagree. We have some positive changes. Look at ratification of the Paris Agreement, when no one expected that the leadership that was displayed by the parliament and by separate people in the parliament and by government and separate people in the government and presidential administration and people from there. So Ukraine became 25th of out of those countries who first ratified this Paris Agreement. There was some bureaucracy, some red tape involved that created obstacles for us, but we became leaders, and Americans said that we are the first kickstarters who started this process of signing And before us, there was, for example, such country as Norway, who are the leader in the area. So we are among the leaders, and this is not the request from society. That was done not from the grassroots level, on the request of civil society or environmental organizations. This is political leadership that was displayed. No, it's not enough. It's not well coordinated, but this is only the beginning, and now there is responsibility not before the citizens of the state, but also before the citizens of all the world. And we show to our colleagues that despite problems with the economy, despite war, we are responsible and we face global challenges because climate change is number 2 after fighting global terrorism. And unfortunately, we should, of course, pay more attention to these issues. So the government should explain to people why it is important, why it should be done, why these climatic issues should be resolved, why it is connected with different areas of the economy, and why we should support electric automobiles and to reduce consumption of coal and other fossil fuels. So the power should provide answer to people, and then people will understand better and will react. And also civil society should demand from power that they pay more attention to these things. And they name people who signed this Paris Agreement. This process of ratification, no one noticed it. When it was done by Barack Obama, all the nation knew what happened, and they built even presidential campaigns on this. Whether you support or you display skepticism in the area, and I call on all the parties and politicians to understand these issues. When you ask people about climate change and what they will do when they be in office and what ideas you will support, and this should be asked by journalists, civil society, and my final statement is then we will be able to synchronize all the areas of work in order to develop the strategy, and then we will be able to increase institutional capabilities of the power. This money from Kyoto Treaty, we just wasted them because we could buy from Paris Agreement, it will be even more difficult to obtain some funds because everyone will compete for this money, and there is a great work ahead of us. And we should communicate these issues more, and this is an interesting thing that it is interesting to discuss with you now. One comment, Gaidutskyi told us about important thing about third part. Not only government but also civil society should get involved, and also the business should get involved, because as of today this is opportunity for investment, and in Ukraine there is such a feeling that there is a threat from this to people who try to earn money. As responsible power, we should provide business some criteria, some points of reference. So business do not meet many standards, and power should say that in 5 years businesses will not be able to work if they do not adhere to world standards, and not only at the level of documents. It should be a trend in business, and business will try to find opportunities. And also the government should understand the strategy of the development of the country, whether we can do it now, tomorrow, the day before tomorrow. So these are irreversible changes, and if we are responsible, if we cooperate with business and develop society and business in Ukraine, we should all work together. And business is interested in this, but they should have clear rules. They should understand that no one comes yesterday and change everything, and there should be clear rules established, and we should help business to transform it as it was done in other countries. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Now the questions from the audience. Good afternoon. Anna Vronska, former deputy head of environment minister. I have several comments. Firstly, I would like to say that we cannot say that Ukraine got lucky because we shouldn't pay under this agreement. This was really a great work of the ministry representatives when our delegates were there in Paris, and they fought for our position. And as to the institutional capabilities, we have interdisciplinary commission on climate change that to work on the climate policy. It is created under the Ministry of Ecology, and there are many representatives of different ministries, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Transport, Agricultural Ministry, and we have problems with communication when we say that we write the strategy, we write climatic energy strategy separately from one another, and at the level of the government there is no proper communication. And now, at the level of Prime Minister, they included in the group the Ministry of Ecology, and when we're speaking about energy strategy, we hope that it will yield its results. And also, I would like to comment on the Oleksiy speech. Some people played and contributed made major contributions in this, and many NGOs supported the ideas, and they were the first one who started this, and they promoted the ideas and forced the government. And we know that these NGOs, they draw the attention to climate change, and they continue to do it now. And I have a question to all the participants of this panel. And you said that the Paris Agreement is the instrument of attracting investment, and we know that in Marrakesh there is the first meeting of Paris Agreement participants. And the question to everyone: what directives were got by expert community and the ministries, and how can Ukraine as a state get this investment through this Paris Agreement? I agree with you fully on the role of NGOs. When I was an activist in such organizations, we demanded and we created performances on this, and this decision on ratification, it wasn't done. So NGOs, they of course contributed, but they saw that the power worked in a good way. And I will be in Marrakesh next week, and I will help our officials, our executive power, to develop and to promote the interest of our state at the level of top officials to attract investment. What we should do for this? First, we should show our political will. And months ago, I attended a meeting that was organized by Japanese who want to invest in Ukraine. And there were representatives from different countries of the European Union. And the Japanese said that among everyone, Ukraine is the first that ratified the agreement, and we want to invest in Ukraine. Then for us, this is a thing that shows the desire of the state to earn, and it is difficult to say what mechanism will be used in order to implement this. No one knows how to do it in the world. So these mechanisms will be worked on in Marrakesh and next year, and we should state our position, and our position is strong because we can speak on behalf of leaders, on behalf of those who started this process, and we want to benefit from this because our political wishes, and we have a strong position. Also, with our colleagues from the ministries and NGOs who will join us on our trip, and they will communicate that for the first time after the Revolution of Dignity, they started to work on the issues of climate change, and please support us. We want to get investment. investment, and that will show that they support us in this direction. The work is colossal that should be done. This is really a giant project. And together with NGO, civil society, and experts, we should increase institutional capabilities of power, and we should work on these issues further. Do you have comments on this? Please be brief. I'll add, so these were comments on my speech, maybe. So even experts didn't expect that we promoted our positions in such a good way, and we were lucky. We won't be donors of this 100 billion. We hope that we will be the recipients of this capital, and our task is to maximally attract and effectively use these funds. And as to institutional capabilities, there are 2 or 3 commissions and departmental commissions, but there should be deputy ministries on this issue. There should be deputy mayors on this, and maybe, you know, deputy head of Kiev administration on these issues. I've never heard of him. Maybe he really exists, but these people should gather each week, and they should show the reduction of CO2 that was done. And as to investment, we should be open. We should show that our economy is a good recipient. Our energy efficiency is 3 times worse than in Europe, and it means that we are more interesting to investors. And for example, they contribute 1,000, and they will be effectively used even better than in European states. And we are really low, and we have where to jump to. And the European Union is at some high level, and before, and in Europe there is free capital. If you allow me. As to the level, the figures that were shown by Dyachuk, 84% of depreciation, and one of the German experts said that it is weird. How do you really exist as a country in such a situation? But there are also positive trends, that you do not have to invest huge funds in depreciation. You just dismantle this and you build everything in new. If, for example, depreciation of 50%, then maybe there would be some restoration of this. So about the Paris Agreement, we should say that now there are potential opportunities that are provided by Article 6 and Article 9 of Paris Agreement, but unfortunately, if we compare with Kyoto Protocol adopted in 1997 and was put into effect 2005, and the countries knew the rules of game and the procedures concerning flexible mechanisms, they were known already, and now fast ratification of the Paris Agreement, this is a plus, but minus is in the fact that according to the Paris Agreement, there should be 18 decisions taken as to Article 6, and this article envisages 3 mechanisms: joint approaches, centralized mechanism, and non-market approaches. So nothing is ready, even draft decisions are not made. So in Marrakesh, the parties will agree on common view how it will look like. That will be an achievement. And really we should understand that we need 2 or 3 years before these mechanisms are created and the decisions are taken as to Article 9. This is financial mechanism, the same situation. There's no draft decision. There will be discussions on this, and as of today we have Green Fund, but we try to get into it, and this is an issue that won't be resolved in the next few months or half year. So we have prospects, but these articles, the Paris Agreement is a framework agreement to a convention, and the parties should take proper decision that will create a content. And I would like to tell you more about, not as an official, but as a citizen who saw these processes of negotiation. So the risks, first, is that despite the deputies discussed these issues about the ways of fighting climate change, there is no, on the agenda, there is no clear strategy how to do it. President and the Prime Minister, they didn't identify the ways how Ukraine should fight climate change. And those contributions, those efforts of Ukraine and UNO, they do not stimulate the reduction of emission. And this is preservation of business, coal business that is now in a bad state. And the second risk for the implementation of the Paris Agreement in Ukraine is that low capabilities of the local government to find the climate change and to develop strategic documents, but there are high expectations that they will get some benefits from the world. So maybe in Ukraine, we won't get benefits from this Paris Agreement, because Kyoto Protocol provided money to Ukraine and Russia in 1997 in order that we joined, and Ukraine, through corruption, through lack of responsibility, Ukraine lost the opportunity to invest in its development, and now we have a window of opportunity for discussion with the world community, with world investors, how to invest in Ukraine, but not in the framework of helping Ukraine, because Paris Agreement won't help Ukraine. That is a developed state, and within this framework of a convention. And I would like to say that energy efficiency for the most so national policy should be transparent and should send clear signals. Ukrainian politicians and Ukrainian population is ready to transform their view on energy consumption.
If you are asked what is the top priority in the climate change struggle in Ukraine, it is very simple: not to change energy or ecology policies or economic policy. The top priority, the first next step should be to change, to ensure democratic principles of country, of the state operations, and to ensure the rights of investors, as we have already resolved today that we should go to green economy. This means that new investors should come who will face real challenge, real opposition. For example, on the from traditional energy sector companies, when the rights of small and medium-sized businesses are ensured who want to create new jobs and the green business, and when they know that nobody will come and take their enterprises, there will be no raids on their enterprises. As for me, for example, I rarely use taxis, but I use electromobile taxis. This is a little bit more expensive, but I want to change my mentality, my behavior, my automobile is not electromobile, but I should go in this direction. And the companies doing green business, they should receive assistance from the government by ensuring their property rights, their freedoms, and so on. Thank you. Maybe this is good that we do not have grants and everything we'll do by ourselves. Now the next question. Euroconsulting, Mykhailo have answered the question which I have, but I would like to specify according to Article 6 mechanism in 6.4, main investment are stipulated from the part of developed countries, and the reduction contributed, they will be contributed to those countries which invested into Ukraine. And what about Ukraine? The transfers, in sub-item C of Article 6.4, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of the country accepting investment, receiving investment, so country recipient. It could be used by the other country which invested to be calculated on the account of its contributions on its national plans, but not Ukrainian national plans of contributions. I would like to say that I have already mentioned Article 6, including this article. It goes that it is necessary to create such mechanism which would prevent double counting. How? Not to allow, how to prevent such double counting. In Kyoto Protocol, in Annex 1, the countries has quotas for emissions. In Paris Agreement, there are no quotas so far. How they will be distributed, these quotas, if they appear, if any consensus is reached that they are necessary, taking into account difference in the targets of the countries. Not all countries set such targets, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Some countries are talking about deviation from some target trajectory, and some countries set other obligations. So how? In the framework of Article 6, to prevent double counting, you transfer something to your investor and he will put this into his contribution to the targets. There are no answer to this question so far. One comment, Ukraine is not a developed country in terms of some official definition. Not in neither in the Paris Agreement we have definitions lists. There are 4 types in Paris Agreement: developed countries, developing countries, and small island countries. small island countries, they are registered by the UN as concerns developing countries. There is a problem. Paris Agreement is based on UNFCCC, which has two annexes, and Ukraine is the party of Annex 1. I would like to remind that according to the convention, Annex 1 includes developed countries and other countries, such as the countries such as economies in transition to market economy. So Ukraine is not developed country. Developed countries is Annex 2 to the convention. They are listed there in Annex 2. Kirill Tamlyak, advisor of the head of SAEE and advisor to Bila Tserkva and participant of the delegation to Paris. Several comments and then question. First comment, we are talking often and I can hear this here, how the representative of Boll Foundation says that we need Paris Agreement, we are the party and now we should get financing very fast, and we are talking about how to engage this funding. We should think about this, but we should not talk about this much. We should think what regional or global initiatives we can use to attract money to Ukraine. For example, I've learned recently at the international meeting that EBRD from the attracted 300 million euros for energy efficiency in our region, including Ukraine. So the funds of this foundation could potentially work in Ukraine, so we should organize specific projects. Why we are so happy that we do not pay under the Paris Agreement? Why should not we invest into the other countries? This would be the right statement. We have joint questions which we should address with Moldova, Ukraine and Moldova together. Then, yes, your question is very clear-cut. I have question to Mykhailo Ivanovich. There were some management bodies to be formed if this should be the first meeting of Paris Agreement Committee. Where shall we stand for it? Please tell us more about this. Well, as concerns the conference, 22nd session of UNFCCC and parties to the protocol and auxiliary bodies of these agreements. The meetings are annual. This year it is planned, as far as I know, there are vacancies in the bureaus of these management bodies. If in Marrakesh there will be the first session held of the parties to the Paris Agreement, it is likely that new management bodies will be established there for Paris Agreement implementation. Official notification and agenda, they were provided on this Monday. Extraordinary situation which we didn't experience before. The first week should be very interesting in Marrakesh because the parties should reach agreement how to organize operation of this conference. Except election of the management body, there will be very many questions addressed there. implementation body, research body, special team for Paris Agreement. They will be considered in auxiliary bodies. Of course, it should be better to concentrate everything under one body, because next year there will be very many meetings to be held, so that we fast do everything which is required to fill this agreement with the necessary essence, necessary contents. I am a member of European team, not Ukraine. Send representatives. You can do this via this team, and discussions. We suppose they will be very extensive and enthusiastic. Russian Federation is also in our team. Just imagine what kind of negotiations there will be. Thank you everyone for participation and speeches, and our audience for watching us. We will also attach this recording of this meeting. A recording of this meeting will be attached to our special issue of UCMC. Thank you.
Раз. 1, 2, 3. Раз, два, три. Раз. Раз, два, три. 5, 7. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три. Раз. 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 1, 2, 3. Раз. Раз, два, три. Раз. 1, 2. Раз, два, три. Раз.